Okay, so today's podcast, we're going to talk about what does it mean to be realistic? Yeah, being realistic. I mean, we've all heard this expression, this word so many times in our lives where we say, "Oh, we need to be realistic. Let's be realistic. You should be more realistic. I should be more realistic. We all should be more realistic." But what does realistic really mean? So yeah, what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the place to start could be thinking about what reality isn't,
Great.
and that way we kind of know a little bit what we're working with. And I'll just say briefly that in Steve and my thinking, we were thinking that imaginary could be a good opposite of real.
Imaginary could be a good opposite of real or realistic. Yeah. That's a pretty good example, I think. Imaginary. Yeah, so then how do we define what it means to be imaginary? That's the other thing. Well, let's talk about that. Let's explore that together, while we're talking about it. I mean, you have uh imaginary, like things that are not physically there, or for example, like telling a story or an event, something that didn't really happen.
Mm.
That's something that's what we could conventionally refer to as not real. Or let's say, for example, one of us hears a story or listens or reads a story, or, like, for example, it could be any kind of a story, like fiction, something that's a comic book, a fairy tale, an adventure, Lord of the Rings, Spider Man, or any of the children's fairy tales, whatever it is, doesn't matter. And whatever one of those characters does in the story, we think, well, we're also going to capture the giant fire breathing dragon. Obviously, that's not going to happen in our world, not in the way that it does in the story. What would you think about that?
Right. I heard somewhere that if we have in our imagination that something's happening, our body still responds in a very similar way. It's
Mm.
like if we think that we're being chased by a dragon, or we're excited because we're going to try to capture a dragon, as you said in your last example,
Mm-hmm.
um, we get excited, and I don't know, it triggers something in us.
Right. Maybe our cortisol goes up, heartbeat goes up, heart starts racing.
Yeah, and that's just based on someone's story that we're perceiving with our real eyes and real ears. But the story itself, takes us to another place or something in the imagination.
And another cool connection that I'd like to draw, that's a really good connection you just made there.
Oh, I appreciate that.
Hey, yeah, by all means. Yeah. So the fact that our body does imagine, or even something that, let's say, we think up that happened to us in the past. We reimagine an event that we experienced that may have been stressful for us, or, you know, dangerous or treacherous or whatever it may be. And then our body reacts to that. Our heart rate goes up, or whatever it is, our cortisol goes up, and we feel that same kind of a feeling again. Even though it's not happening now in the present moment, we still feel it. It's almost like it's happening all over again, and our body doesn't know the difference between
It
the past and the
won't.
present.
Mm-hmm. And where did you say that could take place? Like in a dream, or like daydreaming, or?
Yeah, it could happen in a dream. Definitely in dreams I've had where I've dreamt something was happening that made me feel like I was in a panic or
Mm.
in a state of hysterical panic. Something that was happening that was bad that I thought was terrible, and then I'd be waking up, and it'd be like, oh, thank God it's a dream. That kind of a feeling. It's not real. And then even sometimes I remember having this feeling of relief even before the dream was over, where the dream was so terrible. I thought, this is so terrible. This can't be real. This has got to be a dream. And then some part of me knew, yes, you're right. It's just a dream. And I just wake up halfway there and I'm like, yeah, it was just a dream. And I'm waking up now calmly.
Wow. Yeah, so I think that it helps to talk about the imaginary world before we talk about what's real. I'm thinking that that's helping me decide what I want to say about reality, because of imagination.
Well, one other interesting thing that you just helped me realize is, on one hand, we are in the present in what we think of as a real world. We imagine things that aren't happening but feel like they're really happening. And then on the flip side, fiction, fairy tales, characters and stories and adventures which don't exist in our real world come from reality too. So there's realism in these fictitious characters. Kind of like that writer Stan Lee, the creator of Spider-Man, the Avengers, and all those characters. Although his characters aren't real, he gave them realistic human-like qualities so that people could relate to them. People in our real world could relate to these fictitious characters, whatever those characters may be. Or let's say, what's the name of the author of Lord of the Rings? Tolkien?
Yeah.
Right, Tolkien. Those characters are also lifelike in a way. They have attributes and qualities that real people that we know may have. So it's kind of like the lines blur in some way between our imagination bringing to our real world or our real life, our imagination pulling in things and thoughts and ideas that come from imaginary things, and the imaginary world depends on things that exist in the real world in order for it to come into being, in order for it to become real or created. So it's interesting how each side, whether it's real or imaginary, depend on each other in some way to exist. Maybe I'm getting a little bit too deep here and too...
Well, maybe I could reel it in, not to interrupt.
Please.
But just to kind of steer us to the main point, which all you said is very good. I was going to say believability is something that the realism adds to the imagination, because Spider-Man, in my humble opinion, Spider-Man may not be real,
Right.
but it's believable, because if only the spider, radioactive spider, whatever, bit him,
Right.
then everything follows from that he could have powers. And just that possibility of believability makes us tune in and not say, oh, forget that.
Wow.
We're drawn in because maybe in 1 in a million, it's
Right.
there's still that chance.
Right,
There's
yeah.
the characters are so likable, and we want to root for them. That, yeah, I think there's the aspect of the believability that comes into play when realism meets imagination.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Definitely, because Tolkien, a lot of what he wrote, it's like the events that occur in the stories are based off of real events that happen in the real world, like certain armies or forces taking over. Maybe it was a forethought to World War II or something like that, or World War I, whatever, or something entirely different, but something like that. And getting back to what you're saying about Spider-Man, and yes, that's something else I wanted to say. I'm jumping around here a little bit too. But yeah, getting back to what you said about that, yeah, it's like, it's not impossible.
Exactly. Well said. Yes, it's not impossible.
Right. It's not impossible that with somebody like, regular person that we would know from around the block in school, it could be anybody named Peter, would then get bitten by some special type of radioactive spider. And could there be a radioactive spider running around out there in the world as we know it? Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to disprove. So
Yeah.
we have to leave it open a little bit. And it hasn't been proven, but at the same time, we haven't disproved that, I guess, just to keep the belief alive here.
Exactly, yeah. So it's like, it's definitely not an impossibility that a radioactive spider could exist. I mean, some people may say, oh, yes, it's a radioactive spider with radioactive substances and it bites somebody. Okay, so perhaps some might say, oh, but that person won't be able to get super strong or be able to shoot webs or climb buildings or swing from skyscraper to skyscraper, but maybe they'll get sick with radioactivity poisoning or radioactive poison
tragic.
Or something. That would be tragic, but maybe that doesn't have to happen either.
Nice. Yeah, and if I may, I was going to try to loop in another concept,
Yeah, please.
besides believability. And I was thinking how the real versus imaginary in dreams. You can really think here. With dreams, we.
It's kind of like, yeah, we take dreams kind of are like a recycling of what happens in our real lives.
Hmm.
So it's like mentally we go through our day, we think so many things about so many things. So the dreams are sort of like a replay and a filtering of all that stuff that we gathered up in our day to day lives. It's too much, maybe too much information. I don't know.
Well said. Yeah, and that kind of got me back to what I was thinking about, but I couldn't quite grasp. Dreams have believability because we're running from something. We don't
Mm-hmm.
know why we're running, but
Mm-hmm.
we're running from it in the dream. We could feel like we are meeting new characters in our dreams or doing weird things. But always, to me, in my dreams, it always makes sense. It's like I'm running from a bear, but then I join a tea party, like whatever it is, it keeps on cascading to more and more unrealness, but it's believable to me in the moment and it makes sense as I'm in the dream. When I get out of the dream, wake up, I reflect, I'm like, that makes no sense at all. I mean, there's a little bit of thread running through it that's consistent, but it's very believable in the moment, even though it makes sense.
No, yeah, I mean, no, that's a thing. And another thing I found that doesn't make sense what happens in dreams that I really find annoying. Don't you hate it when you're in a dream and you're trying to run and you can't run?
Yes, I've been there
It's
before.
like you're running on a one of those treadmill type surfaces where the ground's moving underneath you and you're trying to get away from something and you start running as fast as you can, but it doesn't seem like you're going anywhere and you look over your shoulder and you see the phantom or whatever the thing is that's after you. Like I once had this dream where there were these three cloaked phantom like figures with long black coats and these black fedoras,
Hmm.
like black hats, like they're from the Men in Black or something. I don't know. It's like, why am I running from these trench coat looking hooded hatted black figures that I don't know what they're about?
Yeah, I've seen those in music videos and movies before, but yeah, you have them right up close and personal in your dreams, so that's pretty impressive.
And they never say anything.
Oh man.
I don't know what the deal is. They never say a word. They're just there. But they don't ever seem to move either. It's almost like they get close to you by just standing there. And it's, of course, no thanks to that darn treadmill underneath your feet, or maybe it's an escalator belt, like when you're standing on the escalator and it's going backwards.
Mm.
I hate it when that happens.
So we made these charts, to kind of map out these concepts,
Hmm.
as you know. But I was wondering, is there anything else you want to address on this topic on the chart, or do you want to make a different talk for another part? It's up totally. I mean, you're the boss, but I just wanted to say that, you
Well,
know,
I no,
however you
well,
want to go about it.
thanks, but yeah, no, by no means. Yeah, don't worry about it. Yeah, I think we can wrap this up. Um, and in conclusion, here, I would say that reality and fiction are kind of intertwined. So, like to start to not start rather, but wrap things up here. I think that the answer to our question is what does it mean to be realistic? I think it all boils down to separating the two, but knowing how they are intertwined with each other. It's I think that's what it is. I think it's a matter of knowing where fantasy and fiction and reality or realistic or realism draw the line. Where are they separable or are they intertwined?
Mm, mm.
That's I think that's the final conclusion that I would like to end this with is I think that there are some points where obviously you can see what's realistic and for each person, but also it's not completely 100% one or the other. They blend together sometimes.
Yes, I didn't realize that till you made that connection, so I appreciate that.
Oh, yeah. Well, no, by all means. Thanks to having this talk. We could get that out there and kind of, brainstorm it, I guess you could say. All right. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap this up?
No final thoughts.
Okay. Well, then we're going to go ahead and say thank you for listening, and have any questions or you want to ask me something or ask Eric something, by all means, we'll be here.